Hello, shluchim, how are you? Today we're going to hear a very interesting story about a very, very, very special chassid. The one, the only, the famous Rabbi Yekusiel. Yes, Rabbi Yekusiel was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek. That's three Rabbeim. And let's find out what type of person Rabbi Yekusiel was, and what very interesting lesson we can learn from Rabbi Yekusiel. Now, my friends, you see, Rabbi Yekusiel was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, known as an oivid. An oivid is somebody that would sit and daven for many hours, not because he couldn't read Hebrew, not because he failed second grade. Oh, no. Rabbi Yekusiel would look at each word, and he would say every word with so much kavana and so much avoida, and think about what he's saying, and thank Hashem for everything that he has, and daven with a lot of kavana. You see, Rabbi Yekusiel wasn't a mashpia. He wasn't a Rosh Yeshiva. He was a businessman. Rabbi Yekusiel was a businessman. And do you know what he sold? When people would come to Rabbi Yekusiel and say, Rabbi Lepler, what can I buy from you today? He says, today I have the same thing that I had yesterday. And what was that? That was the same thing I sold the day before. And that was Zaltz. That's right. Rabbi Yekusiel was a salt merchant. He would sell salt over here, and he would sell salt over there, because a person needs to have salt if he wants his food to have a little bit of flavor. If you didn't have any salt, your food would be very, very not so gishmak. And on Shabbos, when you cut the challah, you have to put the challah into salt. So that's what Rabbi Yekusiel did. He was a salt merchant. Although Rabbi Yekusiel was a very big oivid, like we said, he davened with a lot of kavanah. His knowledge in Limud Torah, both Nigla and Chassidus, wasn't necessarily that great. His excellence in davening, he was profound in his davening, in Avodah Zatfilah, but in Limud Torah he knew, but not anything special. And so this is how Rabbi Yekusiel from the town of Lepli lived for many, many years. And every so often he would go to the Alter Rebbe, whether it was for Rosh Hashanah, whether it was for Simchas Torah, maybe it was for Pesach, I don't know. And he would go into Yechidus and would spend time with the Alter Rebbe. And he was a very famous Ibri Gigem Mechasa to the Alter Rebbe. And you may even recall hearing about him in the story when the Alter Rebbe was arrested. One day, a young chassid, much younger than Rabbi Yekusiel, is traveling through the town of Lepoli on his way home. And this chassid is coming from the Adi, from the Alter Rebbe. And on his way, stopping off in all the various different shtettlach, he takes the opportunity to share with the chassidim different maimarim and occurrences that happened by the Alter Rebbe. So he comes into the shul by the town of Rabbi Yekusiel, and he gives a klap from Bima after Mincha, and he says, Eminut Hashem, heint bei Nacht wird vorkommen a shir in a maimer von the Alter Rebbe, alle seien eingeladen. Meaning that tonight in Eretz Hashem there's going to be a shir and a maimer. The Alter Rebbe said everybody's invited to participate. And that night the shul was packed with people. Even people that didn't live in that town came from the surrounding towns to hear the shir of the maimer. And the chassid got up and he starts chazering the maimer, and he's explaining one level after another level, going deeper and deeper. And everyone's shaking their heads and they're twisting their beards and they're going, And Rabbi Yekusiel is standing in the back of the room and he doesn't understand. And he feels very bad. And he's trying to listen and he's trying to follow along, but he doesn't get it. And when the shir was over, everybody left the shul, and now it's just this younger chassid and Rabbi Yekusiel standing alone in the shul. And Rabbi Yekusiel goes over to him and says, and Shuldik Reb Chassid, I didn't understand this point and that point. Could you please explain it to me again? And the chassid sits down. Again, he was much, much younger than Rabbi Yekusiel, and he explains it to him again and again and again. He doesn't get it. Finally, this chassid goes home, and Rabbi Yekusiel feels so bad. He thinks to himself, I'm a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. I'm 40 years old, I'm going to the Alter Rebbe. I have yechidus with the Alter Rebbe. And I still cannot understand these deep concepts of Chassidus. Rabbi Yekusiel decided that he's going to sell his business. Not sell his business, I apologize. He's going to give up his business. One day he comes home after Shachris and he sits down by the table. And while they're eating breakfast, he tells his wife and his children, Kinderlach, ich gebe das über zu jedem von euch. I'm taking time off from the salt business. I'm no longer going to sell salt. So if anybody needs salt for cooking or baking or for challah or for Shabbos, or even salt, maybe even to melt the snow outside their house in the cold Russian winter, I'm not going to be available for them anymore. They're going to come to you. It's your responsibility to handle the business. But Tati, what are you going to do? Well, that's a very good question. Tati Yekusiel is going to sit in shul and he's going to learn from day and night, from morning till night. A whole day he's going to sit and learn and dedicate his time to learning Torah, primarily the Chassidus, so that Tati will be able to understand what this younger Chassid understands. You see, guys, even though Rabbi Yekusiel was 40 years old, similar to Rabbi Akiva, was 40 years old, he didn't give up. He didn't say, okay, I'm going to settle with Avodas HaTefillah. I'm going to settle that everybody knows that I'm an expert when it comes to davening. I daven with a lot of kavanah, and that will be my thing. Rabbi Yekusiel said, no, I'm a chassid. I want to know chassidus. And so he gave up the business, and he sat in shul from morning till night, chazering over the Maimarim again and again and again. But it didn't work. He felt hopeless. It wasn't working. It wasn't going into his head. So, Rabbi Yekusiel came up with plan B. What's plan B? One night, he comes home after spending a whole day in shul, and he gathers his family around the table, and he says, Mein Teire Kinderlach. Tati's packing up his bags, and he's traveling to the town of Lubavitch. Lubavitch? What's Lubavitch? Doesn't Tati go to the Alter Rebbe in Liadi? Yes, Kinderlach. The Alter Rebbe has since passed away. It's already past Chof Dalet Tevis. The new Rebbe is the Mittler Rebbe, Reb Toivber. And the Mittler Rebbe now settled in Lubavitch. So Tati is going to go to the Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and learn there. And I'm not going to come back until I am Matzliach in my Limud HaTorah, Limud HaChassidus. The next morning, Rabbi Yekusiel gets on the wagon, and his family and his friends come outside, and they wave goodbye, and the wagon travels all the way to Lubavitch. And when Rabbi Yekusiel gets there, he schedules appointment with the Mittler Rebbe, and he pours out his heart to the Mittler Rebbe. He says, Rebbe, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to understand the concepts of Chassidus, the deep to the regular Maimarim I understand, but the gor tifa Maimarim, that's where I'm getting stuck. And the Mittler Rebbe looked at him. And the Mittler Rebbe says, Rabbi Yekusiel, Ein dover emid lifnei harotzei. Do you really want it? Do you really, really want to understand Chassidus? Because if you really, really want to understand Chassidus, Rabbi Yekusiel, Chazal tell us there is nothing in the world that can stop you. Rabbi Yekusiel walked out of that Yechidus invigorated, uplifted, rejuvenated, like the Mittler Rebbe had just breathed new life into him. He ran straight to the Zal in Lubavitch, took out a sefer, and sat down on the bench and started learning it again and again and again, and chazering it over inside and outside, and then twirling his beard, and then karazling the payas, and walking up and down the Zal, up and down, back and forth, and chazering it over again and again and again. And you know what happened? With time, he started to understand. It started to sink in. Even those deep concepts of Chassidus, which Rabbi Yekusiel was failing to understand or having difficulty to understand previously, was now beginning to sink in. Wow! Who would have thought? The inspiration from the Mittler Rebbe's Yechidus that nothing could stand in the way of his desire. And so it went. Over time, Rabbi Yekusiel was totally transformed from someone that was not only an oivid that knew how to daven, but even knew how to understand Chassidus and the deep levels of Chassidus. Kinderlach. The Mittler Rebbe wrote many Sfarim. And one of the Sfarim that the Mittler Rebbe wrote is the Sefer Imrei Bina, Sefer I'm holding in my hand. And when the Mittler Rebbe wrote his Sfarim, he dedicated his Sfarim to certain Chassidim. The Sefer Imrei Bina, do you know who the Mittler Rebbe dedicated that Sefer to? You're right. Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler, a Chassid in our story. You ever heard anybody say, oh, that guy is a klutz? Or, stop acting like such a klutz. What's a klutz? A klutz is the Yiddish word for a shtick holz, for a piece of wood. You know, in the olden days, or even today, maybe in camp, you remember you sit on a bench in camp, it's a klutz, it's a shtick, it's a piece of wood. What's a klutz? A piece of wood, nothing goes into it. It stays the same. The Mittler Rebbe one time commented on Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler that originally people thought that Rabbi Yekusiel's head was like a klutz, it was like a block of wood. But through Rabbi Yekusiel's effort and determination, being a true example of what it means, ask the chassid to repeat the maimer again. Go out of your business, give over your business, and sit a whole day in shul and chazer. And when that doesn't work, travel to the Rebbe and sit a whole day and learn. And eventually you will transform the klutz. Eventually you'll be able to become someone who's able to understand chassidus. That's not the end of the story. Sometime later, after the Mittler Rebbe passed away, Tzemach Tzedek is now Rebbe. And the Rebbe Maharash is the son of the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Rebbe Maharash is sitting in Zal, or sitting at home, and he's holding the Sefer in his hand, and he's learning Imrei Bina, the Maimarim of the Mittler Rebbe. And the Rebbe Maharash says, wait, I don't understand this. I have a question, I don't understand something. Let me go ask my Tati, the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And so the Maharash walks into the Tzemach Tzedek's room and says, Tate, Rebbe, ich verstehe nicht, I don't understand this thing in Imrei Bina. So the Tzemach Tzedek tells him, Shmuel, the Sefer Imrei Bina, your Zayda, the Mittler Rebbe, wrote it, dedicated to the Chassid Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler. If anybody would know how to explain Imrei Bina, Yekusiel Lepler is the man. So the Rebbe Maharash walks out, and he finds Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler, and he's about to ask him his question. But what do you think Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler was doing? Being an Ovid, Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler was in the middle of davening. And Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler is davening with a lot of kavanah, not chaplap, but saying every word loud and clear and slow, thinking about the taich. And it took him a while. And when he finishes davening, the Rebbe Maharash comes over to him and says, Rabbi Yekusiel, I have a question. I don't understand something in Imrei Bina. Maybe you could explain it to me. And Rabbi Yekusiel looks at him and says, me? Yekusiel Lepler should explain you? The Rebbe Maharash? Something in Imrei Bina? I'm just a businessman. I'm a merchant. I sell salt. I sell zaltz. I don't know this Imrei Bina. I mean, I know Imrei Bina, but nothing like the Rebbe Maharash. And the Rebbe Maharash says, no. My tate, the Tzemach Tzedek, told me I have to ask you. So please explain to me Imrei Bina. So Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler thinks for a minute. And he says, you know what? I told you already I'm a businessman, right? Let's make a deal. I only sell something if I'm making a good return. I'll answer your question, or try to answer your question, on one condition. That you explain to me certain deep concepts of the Maimer, the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek said this Shabbos. And if you don't know the answer to my questions, you're going to go into the Tzemach Tzedek and ask him those questions for me. Deal. So the Maharash pulls out the Imrei Bina and he shows Rabbi Yekusiel the question, and Rabbi Yekusiel sits down and begins to explain at length and in depth with such clarity answers to the Rebbe Maharash's question. The Reb Marash was fascinated. He goes back into the Tzemach Tzedek's office and he tells the Tzemach Tzedek exactly what happened with Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler. The question, the answer, the profound, clear answer, as well as the deal that he made up with Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler. And so, Tzemach Tzedek sat and he listened intently. And Rabbi Tzemach Tzedek said, yeah, Rabbi Yekusiel, he's an example of Yagaitu Matzasi. Try, really try, and then you're going to succeed. That evening, Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler comes to Reb Marash and says, it's time to pay up. Time for me to ask you my questions, and you're going to clarify what the Rebbe said on Shabbos. And so the Reb Marash sits down and he listens to Rabbi Yekusiel's questions, very deep and profound questions in the Maimarim. And then the Reb Marash said, I don't know some of those answers. I got to go ask the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek. And so the Reb Marash walks into the Tzemach Tzedek's office and he asked the Tzemach Tzedek the answers, the questions from Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler. And the Tzemach Tzedek responded with lengthy, clear answers. The Reb Marash, later, when he told over the story, said that week that this story happened, the week of the questions and the answers from Rabbi Yekusiel Lepler to the Tzemach Tzedek, there was an unbelievable simcha by the Tzemach Tzedek the entire week. Shluchim. Sometimes things are difficult. Sometimes things are uncomfortable. Sometimes we tried something once, twice, 3 times, even 5 times, and we didn't succeed. And we could be complacent. We could be happy. Okay, it's good the way it is. Na. A chassid doesn't settle for the status quo. A shliach definitely doesn't settle for the status quo. Oh, no. Yogaiti u'metzasi tamen. Ein dover emid lifnei haratzin. You want it? You gotta work for it. You gotta earn it. And if you really put in the effort, and you really put in the time, ain't nothing gonna hold you down. Chayim.